Many audiences in the United States resist the idea that images have an ideological intent. This is equally true of Black audiences. Fierce critical interrogation is sometimes the only practice that pierces the wall of denial consumers of images construct so as to not face the fact that the real world of image making is political. Bell hooks, Black looks. So let's start by saying a couple things right off top. This movie was spectacular. It was magical, it was enchanting, and Halle Bailey proved herself to be every bit of the princess I thought she would be. She showed up on, honey, and conveyed all of the things that I wanted an Ariel to convey. Now, of course, today we are going to be reviewing the live action film of The Little Mermaid and the many ways in which it drew from and exceeded the thrill and majesty of its animated 1989 predecessor, The Little Mermaid, featuring the cartooned Pale Girl. Love her bad. Let me also start by saying that The Little Mermaid is my favorite Disney cartoon, or was as a kid. I think the more I started to understand plot and storyline, things changed. But there's something about the youthful naivete, there's something about the youthful effervescence and the incredible voice of Ariel and the immense femininity that comes with being fish, darling, that I was always drawn to. But it wouldn't be me, and this wouldn't be this particular corner of the internet if I didn't digest this also as a piece of culturally significant media history. In addition, right, to the idyllic piece of art that it is. It is both and at the same time. And that's because since July of 2019, when, the film was announced, and it was announced that Halle Bailey would be playing the Little Mermaid, a beautiful Black girl, many conversations online about colorblind casting and really colorblindness in general have sparked, right? And whether or not that approach is helpful or harmful. And to be very fair, I initially was not going to give this conversation any credence, right? Because mermaids don't exist, right? So you can cast someone Black, white, yellow, Chinese, polka dot, rainbow colored. Shout out to the rainbow girls. I'm rolling with the LGBT. And it wouldn't have mattered. What mattered to me as a person who is probably or was one of the biggest fans of this movie, I played it so much as a kid that the tape popped. You can't only play a tape so much before it pops. Yeah, I'm from that era. I'm still Gen Z. Don't play with me. But I'll say that the draw for Ariel has always been her fiery red hair, like I said, her youthful effervescence, and that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful singing voice. All of which Halle encompasses with a little red ruby to sleeves hair dye. Our sister had it. Since that announcement, the conversations and the racist conversations have been spiraling all across Twitter, YouTube, and really anywhere a think piece can live, with the casting of a Black Tinkerbell and Peter Pan, with the casting of Black elves and dwarves in Lord of the Rings, and with the casting of Black Valarians in House of the Dragons. Honestly, it's really as if Black people don't exist in the minds of white creators and consumers. Well, not by way of beauty and prestige and real power that isn't tethered to whiteness. This movie is about a little mermaid who is begrudgingly flipping her fins because they don't get it too far. And it is majestic. It is magnificent, truly. But in addition to that conversation, we have to also castigate the intention of the creators, right? The impact of that on its consumers, and whether or not images like this are helping to create a harmful colorblind society or a harmonious raceless one. The two are worlds apart. But if I had to choose, I'd be part of your world. Wait a minute. Hold on. I'm sorry. That was corny. Cut the cameras. Roll the intro. Hey homegirl, homeboy, and homies. Welcome and or welcome back to my corner of the internet, a corner where pop culture meets critical thought and media ghetto antics. Yes, if this is your first time ever seeing my face, my name is Herbie Revalis. My pronouns are he, she, him, or hers, and hers. And yes, that does mean that I wear pants, skirts, pros, and purses. Now look, we are later going to, in the second half of this video, talk about, the colorblind conversation that is sparked from this. We're going to talk about racelessness. We're going to create a distinction and a definition for the two, a delineation between the two, explain the similarities and the differences. But first, I would like to focus on our girl, Halle Bailey, and the cast and crew, and really the story of The Little Mermaid, right? Did this pay homage to, exceed, or flop as compared to its 1989 predecessor. Now, coming into the theater, I knew that the story would be a bit different because Halle Bailey told us in an interview with The Edition, and I quote, "I'm really excited for my version of the film because we've definitely changed the perspective of her just wanting to leave the ocean for a boy. It's bigger than that. It's about herself, her purpose, her freedom, her life, and what she wants. As women, we are amazing, we are independent, we are modern, we are everything and above. And I'm glad Disney is updating some of those themes." Yes, Disney! Here's what I'll say right off the top. Halle Bailey was magnificent. You were magnificent. You captured the character, the youthful naivete, the effervescence, the innocence, the purity, the curiosity, the beauty, right, of Ariel, because we know in the story she doesn't do much talking, right? Her body language does a lot for her, and Halle served me cut by the face, and also served me emotion, served me everything that I wanted from a real life version Ariel. Shout out to you for your performance. I want to give you that right off top. It was spectacular, fantastic, enjoyed it a lot. Now, what I'll also say is the storyline. The storyline as compared to the animated. Now, we did lose a couple scenes from the animated that I really enjoyed. That's fine, like the scene with Sebastian about to be cooked, and we're going to get into Sebastian in a couple of minutes. But I will say that the storyline added a real life element, a live action element that I enjoyed, right? And it makes sense when I think back to what Halle said about creating a story that is about her wanting to join the world, right? Of course, we always knew that in the story of Ariel, she was infatuated with the human world and wanting to be a part of the human world, right? But I don't think she was necessarily in love with Eric. It's just she saw a bit of herself in him, right? They both have a similar longing. And so it made their connection more realistic, right? I don't just want him because he's someone that is attractive that I rescued. I see a bit of myself in him. And then as they begin to hang out and Eric does most of the talking, what I will say is, how you fall in love with somebody who don't talk back? Well, I mean, people do it all the time with Jesus and whatever, the God of your understanding. I've done it. Actually, you don't even have to talk too much. We can find love in the body language. Amen. So I believe that it's not realistic, but maybe it is. Oh, the multicultural daughters. Each one of his daughters represented one of the 7 C's, and they each were, well, multicultural, representing different cultures. There was a black one named Tamika. Wait, I think he said her name was Tamika. Tamika. Shout out to Tamika. Shout out to our girl Tamika. I enjoyed them, each and every one of them. Shout out to the king being white, but also I feel like he may be a member of Latinidad. I didn't research that, but let me know in the comments. Is he Latin of some sort? Oh, and another thing that I wanted to say. When I watched this in the theater the day before it came out, I actually filmed a different version of this video right after I watched it on Thursday. I went to go see a 3 o'clock showing, and that video had no sound. That video had no sound. So here we are. I'm recording it again because I love you and I want to talk to you. But what I will say is when I was in the theater, and I've had more time to sit and think on it, and it was just such a beautiful, magical experience. There were kids singing the songs. There were kids, and I'm like, this is like the debut day, not even just the debut week. They're singing. Well, I mean, obviously we know these songs, but they're little kids. They're new kids. They're new to the planet. So I think their introduction to Ariel, the character, is this movie, right? And I could hear them giggling and laughing and just enjoying themselves. And it reminded me of when I was a kid and I watched, Ariel for the first time. And I fell in love with her story, with her plight, with her feeling othered, with her feeling like there was more for her to do, her independence or her search for it. But it also brought me back to when I was a kid and I watched Brandy, right, for the first time, play Cinderella. And I remember thinking she was so magical. And I didn't have the language to say that I felt like, I was being represented or representation matters, right? But I did understand that there was a likeness between the two of us. Me being a feminine person who people have always read as feminine, I always identified with that. And me seeing that she is brown, like dark brown. Not just the kind of brown that is acceptable but was distant from me. She was a kind of brown girl, dark brown girl, who had long hair. I felt like as a kid I always saw dark brown girls who had short hair, and in that way, as a kid, they didn't feel as glamorous and even feminine to me. And so to see her with those long braids and just, it was magical. And to see these kids feel connected to that kind of magic really spoke to me. Now, a couple of the pitfalls of this movie, because everything can't be sweet, Bookie. As a Haitian, Jamaican, Caribbean American, black motherfucker, I was offended by that Jamaican accent, David Diggs. Now, the first actor, who was the first actor? I have his name written here, Samuel E. Wright. Even though his accent was a bit forced, it wasn't as offensively bad as David Diggs' accent. What is wrong with, like, were there no Caribbeans around in LA? Were there no Caribbeans to book with an actual authentic Caribbean accent? Especially because this movie does a really good job of placing this story in a Caribbean setting so that Ariel can be, black, and, the king who was adopted, the prince, Eric, who's white, can be adopted by a black queen. And when you're in the movie and you're in the village or the town, whatever, there's people of every different culture represented, it feels like, right? So with that logic, we couldn't have hired a real motherfucking Caribbean who has a patois accent? You tell me. I don't know. Maybe you didn't have the budget. Girl, it was bad. I'm sorry. But I did enjoy the beauty of the songs. Under the Sea, wonderful. Kiss the Girl. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. In terms of the direction of this movie, wonderful. The production of this movie, spectacular. It was technically very spectacular. I enjoyed all of the technical aspects because I know that this was a huge feat, right? It was not a cheap feat. But Disney, you got it. Melissa McCarthy did an incredible job. I'm going to say this, and I want you to receive this in the best light. Melissa McCarthy is brilliant, right? But so was Pat Carroll, which was the original Ursula in the animated version, was brilliant in this role. I'll say this. Once you've had a taste of greatness, right, you want someone to meet that standard. And while Melissa was incredibly funny and she added her own flair, she did not elevate the role of Ursula. Halle Bailey elevated the role of Ariel. I don't ever want to hear the original version. And shout out to the original lady gracing Halle with all of her tens, because Halle deserves it, and giving her all of her tens. And actually being in the film, she was the lady who gave her that fruit or the fork, one of the two. It was beautiful. So I was like, oh my God, I know her. Guys, I know him. I know him. I'm going to wrap this up because we've got some theory to discuss. I'll say that Scuttle did an incredible job. I loved Scuttle, I forget the name of the actress, but she perfectly captured exactly what Scuttle gives, and they added a little bit more. They gave Scuttle more scenes, and I enjoyed that. What else do I want to say? I don't know. Shout out to my girl Tamika. With current debates about race and difference, mass culture is a contemporary location that both publicly declares and perpetuates the idea that there is a pleasure to be found in the acknowledgement and enjoyment of racial difference. The commodification of otherness has been so successful because it is offered as a new delight, more intense, more satisfying than normal ways of doing and feeling. Within contemporary culture, ethnicity becomes spice, seasoning that can liven up the dull dish that is mainstream white culture. What is clear now is that the West's fascination with the primitive has to do with its own crisis in identity, with its own need to clearly demarcate subject and object, even when flirting with other ways of experiencing the universe. Let me just prop this up right here because Bell Hooks did her little one too, and if you haven't gotten this book, get it! So now that we've discussed the brilliance that is the production of this film, I think it's time that we take a moment to look at what may lie beneath the surface. Not just within this movie or even within the genre of fantasy, but really within our relationship to race and racial positioning in image making, right? Because as Bell Hooks says, image making is a political decision. It's a political process. The way we choose to curate garments, emotions, tonalities, scenes, right? All of these things with respect to race, gender, sexual orientation, in our own worlds, right? The way we choose to construct those things matters. They come from somewhere, and those places have a memory, right? And we can see that memory running through image making. So are we creating something that is elevating the conversation, that is adding something new and progressive to the conversation, or are we being regressive, right? I think the best way to define those things, or to see what the intention or the impact of a film like this and other images like this are to identify colorblindness and racelessness, and kind of create a distinction between the two. So colorblindness is defined as a racial ideology that posits the best way to end discrimination is by treating individuals as equally as possible without regard to race, culture, or ethnicity. And I would add that the method by which they treat people equally is by ignoring their racial presentation. Whereas racelessness, which is an entire theory that has several different components that live inside of it, and if you want to really better understand it, you can check out Dr. Sheena Mason's separate YouTube video, who is like a really forward thinker within the understanding and the conversation around racelessness. Or you can watch Khadija Mabo's video that I will put in the link down below, which I just did a feature with Khadija Mabo and have another one coming up. If you guys have not seen that video will also be in the description box below. Head on over into my friend's channel. They are one of the most forward-thinking thought leaders on this platform, and I love them for it. So yeah, but I'll just define racelessness here at this moment. Racelessness, as defined by Dr. Sheena Mason's website, thetheoryofracelessness.com, I think. The core tenets of the theory of racelessness are as follows. Race is not meaningless, since racism and valuable aspects of humanity hide behind race. Race doesn't exist in nature or as a social construction. That's where things get tricky for me. Although we are all racialized by ourselves and others, we are raceless. That's something surprising that I can get behind, right? Racism includes the belief in race as biological or as a social construction and the practice of racialization. Okay, racialization is the process of applying an inescapable social hierarchy, race, to humans. Racism does not exist everywhere in the same way. As some philosophers say, race doesn't travel. Okay, so if I'm going to approach both of these as good faith arguments, I would say that both of them have the explicit goal of removing race from social conversations in order to eliminate racism, right? Cute. We love that in theory. However, one seeks to dismantle race by first acknowledging that racism is real. And race has created a kind of racism that continues to be and has been an issue for Black people and non-white people, while the other one merely wishes to erase it from conversations as a whole. Sorry, I don't know why my tongue is so thick today. Now, to be fair, both have issues no matter how big or how small. But I want to start with colorblindness and my issues around that, right? I don't know if colorblindness with regard to image making is like willfully ignorant or intentionally divisive in terms of creating images in a way that racelessness is just not. Because both are critically aware of Black outrage and the capital around that. And just the capital around creating or injecting Blackness in spaces that have been deemed white only. I will say, it's difficult to contest reimagining historically white characters as non-white, particularly within fiction, because literally, why not? Why can't an elf be Black? Why can't a mermaid be Black? They're not real! They're not real, right? We deserve to exist in fantastical spaces as well. But a couple things, in my view, must take place. I think racial consideration for how we exist in those predominantly white spaces must be considered. It must be a part of the process of creating this story, because it's not just enough to say that we exist there. If you're going to inject Blackness in a space that has historically been white without creating that kind of precedent, I don't trust you, right? Your intention seems nefarious to me. Art is supposed to push conversation forward. And like Billy Porter always says, it's supposed to change the molecular structure in the hearts and minds of people. And I would also add that it's supposed to change our relationship to the world around us. So while fantasy is an opportunity for us to escape, and it does offer us, yes, escapism, I think it also offers us a model for reimagining the world around us. So injecting, some of the most salient issues that face us, right? And providing fantastical solutions, it's fantasy. Why not? Right? I think that the methodology of overcoming, of facing it head on, of addressing it, is important, even in those elements of escape, right? Reimagination is important. You may not change the world with your ideas, as Tupac said, but you may spark the thought in the person who may change the world, right? That's my approach, period. Because as Bell Hooks says, image making is political. Let me pull out this book. She says something in page, I want to read it. directly to you. The significant critical intervention that he made was the insistence that the logic of white supremacy would be radically undermined if everyone would learn to identify with and love blackness. Cone was not invoking the notion of racial erasure, that is, the sentimental idea often voiced by religious folk that racism would just cease to exist if everyone would just forget about race and just see each other as human beings who are all the same. Instead, he insisted that the politics of racial domination have necessarily created a black reality that is distinctly different from that of whites, and that from that location has emerged a distinct black culture. Fast forward a little bit, she goes on to say, liberals may pride themselves in their ability to tolerate others, but it is only after the other has been redescribed as oneself that the liberal is able to be sensitive to the question of cruelty and humiliation. This act of redescription is still an attempt to appropriate others. Only here it is made to sound as if it were a generous act. It is an attempt to make an act of consumption appear to be an act of acknowledgement. Read them, girl. Bow. Yeah, Black Looks eats down caboodles, bow, bow, bow. Okay, so on to the theory of racelessness, because I think it may be more useful in creating images, and I think that that actually is the approach. Well, that isn't the approach that this movie took, but that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. In this context, girl, it's just a Little Mermaid chat. This is for kids. As I said, the theory of racelessness was introduced to me by Dr. Sheena Mason, and it was further explained to me in Khadija Mabo's video that I will link down below that I think you guys should all watch. Now, I'll say this. I vehemently disagree with much of what Dr. Mason has to say about racelessness and how race really doesn't exist. I would agree that race doesn't exist. I would agree that we imagine that it exists. I would agree that culture, ethnicity, history, shared customs and values are hiding behind racial elements, and in that way, in addition to stereotypes, right, that create a monolithic experience that is not true of the black experience, right? And in that way, it is an incredibly racist. What she wants to do with it, I vehemently disagree with. She is an eliminativist, which means that she wants to eliminate race from the conversation. I am a reconstructionist, which is, I would say, a unique experience has been created amongst all black people and other people of other racial groups. I can only speak to my own, right? And so in that way, I want to create images that celebrate us, that show us in beautiful lights, in disturbing lights. And I want to see us as ubiquitously and as multiplexly, if that's a word, or as multiplex as white people, right? Because that is why white people get to be the objective. Their bodies are seen in medical textbooks and in fantastical fairy stories and in history and in socio-political conversations, and they're so ubiquitous, and we see them in such complex and nuanced and manifold ways that we begin to see them as the objective, right? And so in that way, there is no distinct white culture or white experience because it is so manifold. And that is what I want. That is the kind of ways that I want us to be seen. And I think a lot of that can be done through image making, not all of it. All of our work is different, but much of it can be done through image making. And so because racelessness does acknowledge that race creates a kind of racism that infects and impacts the way we navigate life, I can get behind it a little bit. And I think that this may be an approach that we can use in image making, because honestly, the idea of race creates conversations so divisive and so contentive, or like creates so much contention that like around just defining who is a member of that particular race, right? People are still questioning if Meghan Markle is as black as Serena Williams, if Zendaya is as black as Lupita Nyong'o. You understand what I'm saying? And so we as a group of people, and that is the purpose of race. It is meant to be divisive and to create modes of subjugation, divide them amongst race, hue, size, socioeconomic stances. All of these social constructions exist to relegate our lives to a living hell. So fuck all that shit. What else did I want to say? I feel like I'm jumping all over the place. I did want to tell you guys that I think that Bridgerton does racelessness very well, but I'm not going to talk about that in this video because I filmed this video already twice. I'm getting tired. I'll say that racelessness is the way, the truth, and the life only if you're a reconstructionist. I'm just kidding. You can take whatever approach you think is best. What do you think is best with regard to colorblindness, racelessness, or none of this shit? stop putting black people in white stories. Write our own stories, because that is also a good point, right? The fact that Encanto was able to be top 10 on the Billboard, Don't Call Me Bruno, that went #1, that went diamond in my household, and it actually was on the Billboard charts. And also it sold incredibly well. That shows you that there is a yearning for stories about diverse people. You guys can just stop placing people of color in historically white context and create new stories as well, right? You can stop relying on the outrage of black and brown people to sell your movies. That's also an option. However, I've got to go. This is way deeper than y'all probably thought it should have been for a fantastical movie like The Little Mermaid. I love The Little Mermaid, but I had to take it. I had to take it there because I'm tired. Should I zoom to my final thoughts? Okay, let me go to my final thoughts and then we're going to close out. Hey guys, hey. So this whole video does beg the question, do black people, even in fantastical stories, have to exist at the center of oppression? And I would say yes and no. I would say make it make sense when you add black people to historically white only fantastical or any genre spaces, because while I like escapism, I personally always like escapism that is rooted in some real shit, so that your work as an artist, as a storyteller, can elevate the conversations and the experiences of real life people. So while I don't think that we should always exist at the center of oppression as black people, as queer people, as women, as what have you, I do think that there is something to be said about understanding that humans have the capacity and the propensity to do fucked up shit to people on the basis of things that they cannot control. And so that should always be at the center of conversations with solutions, or with, you know, just the real human experience of maybe there isn't a solution to this story, but maybe we just get to sit with our destructiveness as human beings. I love y'all. I've got to get up out of here because it is now Memorial Day and I've got to hang out with my family. Thank you guys for staying to the end of this video. You know I love you. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you made it to the end, you know I love you too bad. Comment the Big Marine. Thank you for making it to the end. Join the Patreon. I have a video going up live of another homegirl hangout. If you missed the first live one, this one is going to be with my real friends. I may include a clip at the end of this. I don't know. Depends on how long this video is. Like I said, I love you, but you know I'll never leave you without saying this. I am in a constant state of practice, and so are you. You can never fail when you're in a constant state of practice. I love you. Real bad. Bye, homegirl, homeboy, and homie. 5 minutes with God, or $50 million.
What started with
5 minutes with God, bro.
$50 million. Girl,
can you elaborate on that?
what is that conversation? What benefit am I gonna get from that conversation?
She about the money. She about her money. She about her bag. One thing about girl, she about her bag. She about her bag. She ain't no fuck shit.
No, but like, I know.
She don't want to have conversation.
So like, question for y'all, what would y'all say?
And then I will secure a one-way ticket to heaven.
But it's only 5 minutes.
Then I will fuck every nigga in motherfucking Hollywood. Cause I already know I got my one-way ticket sitting in my bra. Next case. This is the last question. Homegirl, you're in the hot seat.